The Dad Joke Detective. Stan the Dad Detective loved two things, a good mystery and a groan-worthy dad joke, both of which he used to keep the neighborhood guessing. One sunny morning, he put on his detective cap and announced to his son, "The case of the missing garden gnomes has officially begun." Armed with a notebook, a magnifying glass, and a pocketful of puns, Stan hit the streets of his colorful neighborhood to gather clues. His first stop was Margot's house, where her conspiracy theories were almost as wild as her pet parrot, Winston. "They're missing, Stan," she whispered. "I think the gnomes are holding secret midnight meetings to discuss overthrowing lawn decor." Stan grinned, jotting down gnome conspiracy in his notebook, and asked, "Do you think they'd call it a lawn and order meeting?" Margot gave him a half-amused, half-annoyed look, muttering about Stan's strange sense of humor and bizarre detective methods. Next, Stan spotted Tommy, the neighborhood kid with a penchant for skateboarding and a growing interest in dad jokes. "Hey, Tommy," Stan called, "do you know why the gnomes went missing?" Tommy shrugged, eager to hear the punchline. "Because they couldn't stand being rooted in one place," Stan declared, and Tommy laughed, shaking his head. Together, they went to check out the scene of the crime, Mrs. Jenkins' yard, where 5 gnomes had mysteriously vanished. Mrs. Jenkins was in her garden, peering around with a look of utter exasperation at the empty spots her gnomes once filled. "Stan," she pleaded, "those gnomes mean the world to me, especially Sir Sprinkle-a-Lot, my watering can holding favorite." Stan nodded solemnly and replied, "I know what you mean, Mrs. Jenkins, this is no small matter." Rolling her eyes, Mrs. Jenkins led them to the last place she'd seen Sir Sprinkle-a-Lot and his ceramic companions. Stan crouched, examining the ground around the empty patches with great theatrical flair as Tommy watched in awe. "You see, Tommy," Stan whispered, "you have to treat every clue like it's the punchline waiting to be uncovered." They found a few faint footprints and a bit of chipped paint, which Stan pointed out with exaggerated excitement. "Look, Tommy," he said, "someone clearly tried to gnome in and out of here without being noticed." Mrs. Jenkins chuckled despite herself, saying, "Stan, only you could turn this into a comedy routine." As they walked down the street, Stan mulled over his next move, deciding to visit Bob, the neighborhood prankster. Bob was notorious for practical jokes, from putting pink flamingos in people's yards to switching their mail. "Bob," Stan greeted him, "did you hear about the garden gnomes who disappeared without a trace?" Bob feigned innocence, but Stan could see a twinkle in his eye as he replied, "Sounds like a gnome body problem." Sensing he was onto something, Stan decided to play along, saying, "Wouldn't want them to feel gnome sick, right?" Bob laughed, but his laughter was cut short when his dog, Buttons, appeared carrying a tiny red hat. "Aha," Stan declared, pointing, "looks like Buttons has a fondness for fashion and garden gnome accessories." Bob shrugged, explaining that Buttons did indeed have a habit of borrowing things from neighbors' yards. Stan added Buttons, potential suspect, to his notebook, wondering if the dog had hidden a stash somewhere. Next, they headed over to the park, where several families were gathered, discussing the recent gnome mystery. "Does anyone know what kind of music garden gnomes listen to?" Stan asked the crowd, grinning mischievously. A few kids looked at him with wide eyes, and he answered, "Rock and gnome roll, of course." This got a few laughs, but one boy named Leo mentioned seeing some gnomes moving by themselves late at night. Intrigued, Stan and Tommy decided to set up a stakeout, complete with snacks, in Mrs. Jenkins' yard. As the moon rose, they watched and waited, listening to every creak and rustle in the bushes. Suddenly, a figure darted past, a teenager carrying what looked like Sir Sprinkle-a-Lot under his arm. "Freeze!" Stan shouted, nearly tripping as he tried to leap over a bush, but the figure disappeared. The next morning, They traced a line of footprints leading to the nearby cul-de-sac, ending at Margot's house. Margot looked genuinely surprised as Stan filled her in on their nighttime discovery, nodding thoughtfully. Perhaps they've been under an enchantment all along, she mused, reverting to statues by day. Stan chuckled, humoring her, but deep down, he suspected they were close to cracking the case. He examined the scene at Margot's more closely, spotting a tiny ceramic hand sticking out from under a shrub. "Looks like Sir Sprinkle-a-Lot found a new hiding spot," he announced, pulling the gnome free triumphantly. Margot gasped, but Stan reassured her, saying, "Looks like the gnomes have been undercover agents." Tommy laughed, and the crowd that had gathered started to clap as Stan returned the gnomes to Mrs. Jenkins. Just then, Bob arrived, sheepishly confessing that he and a few friends had staged the prank. "We thought it'd be funny to make it look like the gnomes had gone on a little adventure," he explained. Stan shook his head, grinning, and replied, "You just about drove me gnome sane with worry." With the case solved, Stan took a final lap around the neighborhood, basking in his victory. The neighbors cheered, appreciating his quirky style of sleuthing, even if it involved more jokes than clues. Mrs. Jenkins hugged Sir Sprinkle-a-Lot tightly, promising to keep a closer eye on him in the future. Tommy beamed, proud of his new detective and joke skills, vowing to follow in Stan's footsteps. "Who knew a few jokes could solve a case?" Tommy asked, to which Stan replied, "I always keep a pun up my sleeve." As the sun set, Stan declared his mission accomplished, proud to be the neighborhood's unofficial detective. From then on, every time a gnome went missing, the neighbors would giggle, knowing it was probably just a prank. Stan took it all in stride, forever ready with a joke and his trusty magnifying glass, just in case. Over time, he became a local legend, famous not only for his terrible puns but also for his brilliant deductions. The neighbors bonded over the mystery, with Stan's humor helping them grow closer as a quirky community. In the end, Stan knew that solving mysteries was less about finding clues and more about bringing people together.